Welcome, everyone, to another episode of TSSA Talks. This is Brian Johnson. I'm the Director of Player Development for Tennessee State Soccer Association. We are extremely excited to partner with the folks at the Exit Inn, which is a historic music venue here in Nashville, Tennessee, with our TSSA Talks series. Our goal is to shine a light on some underrepresented communities in soccer and to help bring more awareness and create some conversations. We want people to be talking about how can we all be a part of making our game better and our world better. We are super excited to be joined today by Warren Austin. Warren, thank you for joining us. Warren is our Northeastern District Director, who serves as a member, therefore, of our board of directors that helps to govern and run Tennessee State Soccer Association. So he's got a chance today to sit down with us. We're excited to ask him some questions about his background, his experiences, and just to have a conversation about the game in general. So Warren, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, great. Well, with kind of as we go sort of to part one of this interview series, the one thing that we've tried to ask everybody is to kind of help us to understand the context of how and when soccer became a part of your life. Everyone who we're interviewing here has soccer as a major part of their life, and you certainly are so gracious with your time as a volunteer to spend the amount of time you do to help our board and our organization function the way it does. Clearly, soccer is something that's near and dear to your heart. So can you give us a little bit of a background as to how soccer came into your life and became a part of your journey?
Sure. Well, I got started with soccer probably back when I was in middle school in Bristol, Virginia. It's small town, about 20,000 people population-wise. Hasn't changed too much since then, but I started playing when I used to go after school. Always go to the Bristol Boys Club, and a player from King College came over one day and introduced the game to us. I had never touched a soccer ball prior to that. His name was Kobna, and he was from the Gambia in West Africa. He introduced it to me, loved it, and played it ever since that point. Even though we didn't have a high school team, I constantly played and practiced with them, with the King College players, and as well as some adult players. So we didn't have any kind of youth programs at that point.
Well, so that's really interesting, Warren. Just right off the bat. So here we're in the mid 70s, right? Time frame. We're not going to give an exact date on your age. I'm not going to ask any ladies their weight. I'm not going to ask any fellas their age for sure. But so this is the mid 70s, and you've never had any experience with soccer. It's not on TV at this point. The NASL isn't even here yet. So soccer is really in its infancy in our country. But your exposure, especially during that time, was another man of color, another, in this case, not African-American, but an African gentleman who's here studying, is the person who introduced you to the game. When you're at the boys club there in Bristol, what's the makeup of the people you're with? Is it is it very inclusive? Is it very diverse? Is it very specific? What's the other folks who are introduced to the game at the same time along with you?
Yeah, it was diverse, mainly Black and white. At that point, you really didn't have many Hispanics in the community. So it's, I'd say, majority white. Bristol has about 8%, 7 or 8% African American population. So it's majority were white. Most of the people that came to the boys club were financially struggled, I guess I should say. Most of them grew up in government housing, which I did as well. And so we were poor, but we didn't know we were poor.
Right. So the Boys and Girls, it was actually just the Boys Club back then. That was before those clubs merged. So the Boys Club provided some after-school activities and different things. You guys would play different sports, have different activities. And so soccer gets introduced to you. And was it like lightning in a bottle? Was it immediately, did you play other sports, or was this just sort of your athletic endeavor all the way along?
No, I did play other sports. Played football up to middle school, played basketball up through middle school. Ran track all the way through high school, and So I was kind of a multi sport person, but soccer was one that I really enjoyed and put the extra time into it.
If you look back, Warren, is there what was it about the game? Is there one or two things about it that helped set it apart or make it something for you? For some of our other folks we've interviewed, it's just the fact that they were pretty good at it, and that's what drew them in. Like, hey, I was pretty good at it. People clapped, so I kept doing what made people clap. Made my daddy smile, so that's why I did it. Was there something about the game or something about the culture, the experience of it that brought you to it or brought the joy of it to you?
For me, I think it was different than the other sports, and because I did put the extra time into it, I became a much better player than my friends. So anytime we had little pickups and games and playing around, I usually could maneuver around them fairly easy, just because I had put not that I was a better athlete, but because I put more time into it. That drew me into it, and then I guess it was around I was 13 or so years old. I actually got to go to Washington D.C. to watch the New York Cosmos play.
Yeah.
If you remember, around that time, Pele was playing for the Cosmos, Franz Beckenbauer was playing for the Cosmos, and Carlos Alberto from Brazil was playing for. And who was the other? There was another player I can't recall, but all of them were on the Cosmos team at that time, so I got to go to Washington D.C. and watch them play.
So are we looking at like late 70s, early 80s at this point, somewhere in there, Warren?
It was late 70s.
Okay, yeah. So that's when like the NASL was really taking off, and all the global superstars were coming over. One of our other interview subjects mentioned, got to see Johan Cruyff play for the Washington Diplomats. George Best had come over from England. Like all the best players from around the world were over here and playing. And we went from like no professional soccer to that.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. So what a crazy time. So despite you mentioned there's no high school soccer back then, there was certainly no middle school soccer. High school soccer wasn't an officially recognized sport, certainly in Tennessee. So you're confirming also on the other side of that divide in Bristol. It wasn't in Bristol, Virginia either. So you then had an opportunity, despite not having played in high school, to still get to play at the college level. How did that opportunity come to you? And then how did your college career go?
Mainly, like you said, I didn't get to play any in high school, but I got to practice a lot with the King College team, and so the coach got very familiar with me and knew me just from going over and watching them practice, watching their games, sitting on the side of the hill, watching them play, practicing with them whenever I could. So he got to know me very well just through that experience. And so after I graduated from high school, he asked me if I had any interest in playing at the collegiate level. And at that time, I was either going to do soccer or run track at the collegiate level. And so I really loved soccer, so I chose to play soccer there at King. I played there 3 years, and I left my fourth year because of the degree that I wanted to major in, and I could not get it at King College. And so I played defender 2 years and striker my third year. We got a new coach my third year, and he moved me up to striker. So
I bet he was sad when you left.
Yeah, I think so.
So what was that degree you were pursuing, Warren?
It was in computer science.
Okay. So, wow, you talk about being cutting edge. You're a soccer player before there's soccer in high school, and you're in computer science back in the 70s. You know, you were just, a garage away from starting Apple, I guess.
Yeah. I wish.
We all wish.
Yeah.
All right. So you've gone to King, you've played, and so then you're sort of transitioning. We have to be, some of us, we have to make adult decisions. So you're adulting now. You've made a decision, despite loving to play the game, that you've got to make a change, go to a different university, complete your education so you can kind of get the rest of life started. You then graduate, go on. How did you, as we sort of finish up this first part of the interview, how did you continue to stay involved in soccer sort of through your 20s and sort of as you began your professional life?
I did take a little bit of a break after I left team for a couple of years, did play some intramural at ETSU's where I went to finish up my schooling, and but I played intramural soccer there because they didn't have a collegiate team at that time. So I stayed a little bit involved from that. Then after college, I mainly was involved just through repping youth teams in my hometown of Bristol, and just even though I wasn't certified referee, but I got to referee the little kids and do a little bit of coaching and instruction, as well as working with the kids, going back and working with the kids at the Bristol Boys Club and trying to help the game grow, and hopefully some of them would enjoy it as much as I did.
Man, I think if there's a common thread from everybody we've talked to so far, Warren, it's that idea of service. And so clearly the impact the Boys Club made on you growing up there, 10, 11 years old in Bristol, Virginia, meant enough to you that you went back to try to give back, to try to see if you could pay it forward so somebody else could have a similar experience and maybe have their eyes open to something maybe they weren't aware
of. Yeah, I agree. You learn so much through the sport, from, like you said, from serving. And one key thing that I took from it as a youth and learning from it was to be able to do things and not necessarily have to be paid for it. And so when Cobbin came over to the Boys Club, he's volunteering his time to teach us the game and sport, not being paid for it. So when I was at the level where I was actually starting to coach at a club level, and at that point coaches were being paid, but I said I would never accept payment as a coach because I want to give back to the game the way and introduce it to people the way it was to me. So to give some respect back to him and to honor what he had done for me, I felt like the least I could do was do the same with the kids that I've coached.
Man, wouldn't it be great if everybody who's gained from our game could find an avenue and an opportunity to give back in kind?
Yeah.
We'd have a lot more volunteers. We'd have a lot more spots to fill. We probably have to turn people away. But that's a real credit to you, Warren, and a thank you from us, from the staff at Tennessee Soccer, from all the people at Tennessee Soccer that are listening. It's that kind of selfless giving and volunteering that really, I mean, our organization operates, on a lean, tight, budget. But without folks like you volunteering, things would be that much more difficult for us to accomplish. So it's a real credit to people who really do see the value in giving. So you're at this point, you're in your career, you're working in computer science?
Yes.
You're living back in the Tri-Cities area?
Yeah, live in Kingsport. Worked first in Bristol for a couple of years, and then after 3 years, ended up working at Eastman Chemical Company located in Kingsport, Tennessee.
Okay.
So for 30 plus years.
At the same company?
Yeah.
Boy, that's worth a gold watch. We don't get many people getting gold watches these days, where not a lot of people stay in the same job for that long.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, a lot of them do it at Eastman. So.
Well, I guess when you find the right employer, maybe you do stay there.
Right.
All right. As we wrap up sort of part one of this series, what I want to do is help me understand, because again, you got an interesting introduction. Being a man of color, you're a black man who was introduced to the sport by another black man. I don't think that's not a very common story. I think, especially during the 70s and even today, there's not as many faces that maybe look like their faces for people to have an experience with. And maybe it didn't ever play a part, and that's great. We don't need to try to create controversy where there isn't any, but in the game, in coming up and sort of your maturation in the game, you going from being a middle school kid to a teenager to a college student to now a young adult, was the game a welcoming place for you where you felt included?
Yeah, the environment I was in and how I grew up, I felt welcome in the sport and the people that were around me. I was fortunate that as being introduced to the game through the college players,
Mhm.
And as you know, a lot of the college players are international players
Absolutely.
coming over. So I was introduced to a lot of people from England, Barbados, uh, Cayman Islands, different countries of Africa. So it's really a big variety of people and cultures that introduced the game to me. So going forward, I never really experienced any in the game of soccer. I never, as a player, really never experienced any kind of discrimination or anything like that. Now I've had to deal with it some as a coach. Um, you hear slurs being said on the field quite often, or even maybe one of your players that you are coaching uh, may use a negative or racial slur that you have to deal with. So it does happen, and I have had that experience through the game. But personally, as a player, I never had any issues.
I think that's really a great story and a great conduit. And we'll leave this as sort of our teaser for part two. So you've been able to come into this sport and as a player never experienced those kind of things. But then, in all candor, as you became an official, as you worked as a referee, as you worked as a coach, as you worked more as an adult in the game, that's when you started to have more experience with sort of, I mean, the ugly side of how race has impacted our sport. I think that's interesting because so many kids, I think today, because our sport has become very, back then there weren't a lot of paid coaches, of course. I mean, there wasn't even a high school program at your high school, for goodness sake. So there weren't a lot of people that were paid to do this. And you were in a very eclectic, because of the university system that was around you, you were in a very multicultural environment. And so that was the environment that soccer was. I think for so many kids in so many communities around our state, when they come to our game now, that's not necessarily what it looks like. So I think it's really interesting. Again, I don't know what the conclusion we can draw at this point, but it's interesting that that kind of place where you felt a part of things at your that organic original state really helped. It seems to me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it really helped you to feel a real part of something bigger.
Yes, it did. And I will say, because I I was involved with a lot of people from different countries and cultures. They could have said things to me and I wouldn't have known. Or some of our opponents. I don't think the guys I was playing with. But I'm just assuming, that they weren't saying anything racial toward me or my teammates.
Well, so that's a great story. So, Warren, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We want to, again, thank everybody for joining us for TSSA Talks. This is part one of our interview series with Warren Austin. We're going to take a little quick break, and then we hope you guys will come back and rejoin us for part two. In part two, we're going to talk with Warren about his journey then from, now he's a professional, he's working, but still in the game, and how that journey took him from there to his current role as one of the members of the board of directors for Tennessee State Soccer Association. So please come back and join us for more TSSA Talks.